Okay, so you want to own a perfume brand. Picture it for a second. You design a bottle that looks like it belongs on a marble shelf in Paris. You give it a name that sounds like a secret whispered in a hotel lobby. You put it on a website for $100. Someone buys it. 3 days later, it lands on their doorstep in a box lined with tissue paper, and you just made money without ever touching a factory floor. Now let it grow. Thousands of orders. Photos on Instagram of the bottle catching light on a bathroom counter. An influencer wearing it in a video that gets shared around for a week. A shelf at a boutique with your logo facing out. Maybe one day a brand worth millions, built from a bottle you designed on a laptop. That is the dream. It is also mostly an illusion about how the money actually moves, because that $100 bottle sitting on the shelf is not a $100 business. The liquid inside might be the smallest cost on the entire list. The bottle costs money. The cap costs money. The box costs money. The company that manufactures it takes a margin before it ever reaches you. If a retailer carries it, the retailer takes a bigger cut than most people assume. Shipping costs money. Advertising can quietly absorb more revenue than the product itself. And underneath all of that sit returns, samples, influencer fees, warehousing, regulatory compliance, and unsold stock that nobody photographs for Instagram. So here is the real question hiding underneath the fantasy. If a perfume sells for $100, how much of that $100 actually belongs to the person who owns the brand? Most people assume it's most of it. The reality is considerably more complicated, and once you understand why, the entire industry starts to make sense. Start with that $100 bottle and follow the money. Retail price is not the same thing as what the brand actually receives. What the brand receives is not the same thing as gross profit. Gross profit is not the same thing as what's left after running the business. 4 different numbers hide inside one price tag, and the gap between the first number and the last one is where most new perfume brands quietly struggle. Now challenge something deeper. Most people assume perfume is mainly about the fragrance itself, the actual scent in the bottle. But the liquid is rarely the product being sold. The customer is paying for the bottle's design, the weight of the cap in their hand, the story printed on the box, the way the brand looks in a photograph, the shelf it sits on, the feeling it's supposed to create when someone catches the scent in a hallway. A perfume brand isn't really selling liquid. It's selling a feeling inside a bottle, and that feeling can be priced far above what it costs to produce because the buyer isn't evaluating raw materials. They can't inspect the product before they experience it. That single fact changes the entire economics of the category, and we'll come back to why. Before any of that gets sold, it has to get made. Formulating the fragrance itself is only the beginning. There's the alcohol base the scent is diluted into, the glass bottle, the cap, the atomizers that sprays it, the label, the outer box, the labor to assemble and fill each unit, and the quality checks before anything ships. Manufacturers also set minimum order quantities, and this is where scale quietly changes everything. Brand ordering 1,000 units pays a noticeably higher cost per bottle than a brand ordering 50,000, because the fixed costs of setting up production get spread across far fewer units. 2 brands can sell what looks like an identical product and end up with completely different margins, simply because of how many bottles they were able to order at once. Now here's where the biggest mental shift happens. Picture that $100 bottle sitting in a department store. Most people assume the brand made close to $100 from that sale. In reality, the store needs its own margin to justify the shelf space, the staff, and the risk of carrying inventory that might not sell. A brand selling through a retailer often receives significantly less than half of that retail price, and that's before manufacturing costs are even subtracted. This is why a perfume can sit at a premium price point in a beautiful store and still leave its own brand with surprisingly thin margins. These particular numbers vary by brand and category, but the mechanism behind them is consistent across the industry. So the obvious move seems to be cutting the retailer out entirely and selling directly through the brand's own website. And this does change the economics, sometimes dramatically. The brand keeps a much larger share of that $100. But here's the trade-off almost nobody accounts for at the start. The retailer wasn't just taking a cut, it was also bringing the customer. Once that relationship disappears, the brand has to build its own audience from nothing through advertising, influencer partnerships, content, samples, email campaigns, discounts, and constant social media presence. A higher gross margin does not automatically mean a higher profit because acquiring that customer has its own cost, and that cost can quietly consume everything the brand just gained by skipping the store. This brings in one of the most important numbers in the entire business. Imagine that $100 perfume costs $35 to manufacture and ship. That already sounds workable until you factor in what it costs to actually find the person willing to buy it. If acquiring that customer through ads and content costs $30, the math on that first sale barely survives. This is why a single purchase rarely tells the real story. What matters is whether that customer comes back. A first sale might only cover the cost of finding them, like a seed that barely pays for itself. The real return shows up later, when that same customer buys again in 6 months without needing to be advertised a second time. That second and third purchase is where the tree finally starts producing fruit, and it's why brands obsess over repeat customers far more than first-time buyers. There's another layer underneath all of this that rarely gets mentioned, and it has nothing to do with marketing. Every brand has to manufacture inventory before knowing exactly how fast it will sell. That means capital gets locked inside bottles sitting in a warehouse, packaging waiting to be used, raw materials purchased months in advance, and slow-moving scents that didn't perform the way anyone expected. A warehouse full of finished perfume can look like wealth on paper, but if it isn't selling, it's simply money that can't be spent on anything else. This is how a brand can show healthy revenue on a spreadsheet while quietly running out of usable cash. Because inventory and cash are not the same thing, no matter how full the shelves look. Now consider why two fragrances, built with nearly identical manufacturing costs, can sell at wildly different prices. The difference usually isn't the liquid. It's the branding wrapped around it. The naming, the packaging, the visual identity, the sense of scarcity, the story behind the bottle, the influencer or celebrity attached to it, where it physically sits inside a store. Branding doesn't create profit by magic. What it actually does is increase pricing power and reduce how sensitive customers are to price, which is a real measurable economic effect, not just an aesthetic one. This is part of why large companies like LVMH, Estée Lauder, Coty, Puig, and Inter Parfums sit at the center of the fragrance industry. Many designer and celebrity perfumes aren't manufactured or distributed by the fashion house, whose name is printed on the bottle at all. They're built and sold under licensing agreements by companies that specialize in exactly this kind of production, distribution, and brand leverage at scale. Picture 3 different perfume businesses to see how all of this comes together. A small independent brand runs a limited production batch, sells mostly through its own website, and works with a modest advertising budget. Its early years are usually the hardest because customer acquisition costs eat heavily into thin margins before repeat buyers accumulate. A growing brand orders larger production runs, works with influencers more strategically, negotiates better manufacturing rates, and picks up some retail placement. Its per-unit economics started to improve simply because of scale. Then there's the premium, established brand. Large manufacturing volume, strong existing brand recognition, real pricing power, wide retail distribution, and a base of repeat customers who no longer need to be convinced. Its physical product may not be dramatically different from the smaller brands, but its business is. Scale alone doesn't explain the gap. Brand power does, which brings the whole story back to something bigger than perfume. The real difference was never really between cost and price. It was between cost and value, revenue and profit, product and brand, inventory and cash, a single sale, and a customer who returns. A perfume bottle just happens to be one of the clearest examples of a much larger economic truth. The most valuable part of a product is rarely the part you can hold in your hand or measure on a scale. A brand doesn't win because its liquid is cheaper or its bottle is fancier. It wins when it creates something people are willing to value differently than its raw materials would suggest. And that perceived value only becomes real wealth once the economics, quietly working underneath it, actually holds together. The next time you pick up a bottle on a shelf, the price tag was never really telling you what's inside it. It was telling you what someone managed to convince you it was worth.